When you look up at the night sky, what do you see? Well, in our beautiful city of Luxembourg, especially in December, more often than not, it's clouds. But imagine we do get a clear night. Most people see the moon and stars, but many feel something deeper. Mystery, infinity, wonder. I studied engineering at university, and I joined the space industry with an internship with a satellite manufacturer. On a company surf trip after a day on the water, we lay back on the warm dunes together and looked up at the night sky. Campfire burning, guitars strumming. Then, someone pointed out what looked like a slow-moving shooting star just above the horizon. "That's an iridium," they said. I worked on those. I was in awe. I'd never realized that you could see satellites from the ground. I was humbled to be surrounded by these people that had built things that were up in space, that had created these manufactured shooting stars. And my wonder at the night sky took on another level, because now I felt that I could touch it. Maybe one day I could design and build something that would go into space and I could look up at and see and point at. If you're looking up at the night sky as a military general or a strategist or an economist today, you might be seeing something completely different. The next frontier of human competition, territory. For now, nobody exactly owns it, and I don't believe this new terrain will be divided in the historic sense with fences and flags and borders, but it will in the sense of influence. Someone is going to write the rules. The question is, will it be the first to get there or the wisest among us? We humans are already touching and changing our solar system in many ways. In my career, I've now personally helped design and build satellites that are orbiting our planet. I've worked on probes bound for distant planets, others orbiting the sun. My hands, these normal human hands right here, have touched and held things which are now on the surface of the moon. Make no mistake, we're already beyond the horizon. Geography no longer stops at the edge of the atmosphere. I see a map being redrawn, but this time humanity isn't jostling for position along coastlines or rivers, but in Lagrange points, orbits, lunar craters. I see the moon, once a symbol of mythology, becoming the next site of human industry. I see the sky above our heads, until recently the realm of gods and dreamers, becoming the most valuable piece of real estate we've ever known. And I see an extraordinary moment when we as a species get to decide how we're going to behave in this new geography before it's too late to choose. I've worked in the space industry for nearly 20 years now, and it's a privileged place to be. In all that time, I can honestly say that I can count on one hand the people among colleagues, clients, customers for whom it was just a job. Everybody else was motivated by that same spark of wonder that once drove me, those same idealist principles that maybe we could advance humankind, leave tracks on another planet, expand the final frontier. Space underpins many of the technologies we've grown to depend on. There's now more than 11,000 active satellites orbiting the Earth. Each one carries more than just a signal. It carries knowledge and influence and control. They tell our farmers when to plant, our banks when to trade, and our first responders how to reach casualties after natural disasters, saving countless lives. They give us GPS, streaming services, weather forecasts, climate data. They're the invisible infrastructure of our modern civilization, and their numbers set to triple in the next decade. Then let's talk about the moon. NASA's planning on sending astronauts back around the moon as soon as April 2026. That's 4 months away. This time, we'll return not as visitors, but as settlers and miners. Raise your hand if you've ever worried about climate change. Well, we think the moon might hold part of the cure. Helium-3 is a very rare isotope on Earth, but abundant on the moon. Why should we care about that? Well, if we crack nuclear fusion, and scientists think we're close, it could provide clean, almost limitless energy with no carbon emissions. We predict that there's enough there to supply humanity's every energy need for over 1,000 years. Then, locked away in the shadow of the lunar craters is water ice. If we split that up, we get hydrogen and oxygen, which we can use to make rocket fuel. So now the moon has become a fueling station for the space industry. Every kilogram we refuel there is one less kilogram that we have to launch from here on the Earth by burning fossil fuels, and a huge amount less CO2 in our atmosphere. You see, space isn't a luxury, it's Earth's life support system. We're not talking about escaping the Earth, we're talking about saving it by moving heavy industry off-planet, where sunlight is endless and gravity is gentle. But here's the challenge. Our laws, our ethics, and our politics haven't caught up. This life support system for Earth is also a legal vacuum. And as with any vacuum, the nearest substance rushes to fill it. We're seeing a race unfold, not just between rocket launchers, but between precedents. Without clear rules, we risk repeating the worst patterns of history, the carving up of new frontiers, the dominance of the few, the exploitation of the many. It was 10 years ago that my pride in this industry that I love was first shaken. It was a night like any other, and I'd stepped outside to empty the bins and was enjoying a moment looking up at the sky, appreciating the clear night and the stars. Then I saw a satellite pop over the horizon, that same slow-moving shooting star that I'd seen from the beach all those years before. At first, I felt that same thrill. But then I saw another, from exactly the same spot, following closely behind the first. And then another, and another, and another, until there was a whole train of satellites moving inexorably across the night sky. The scale of what I was seeing was mind-boggling, shocking, and slightly menacing. And I wondered if my industry was as pure and as admirable as I'd thought. Perhaps there was a sinister side. Maybe there could be a greed, a carelessness to these artifacts encircling our planet. Now, these constellations bring broadband to rural communities in developing countries. A noble goal, but they also show what happens when innovation gets ahead of governance. No one planned this collectively. Nobody considered how to balance access to space technology with access to the night sky itself. Then there are the debris fields. In 2007, China destroyed one of its own satellites in a missile test, creating over 3,000 pieces of trackable debris. In 2021, Russia did the same thing. Those fragments are still racing around the Earth, moving faster than bullets from a gun, and could destroy any spacecraft in their path. Even in peacetime, we've had plenty of near misses with the International Space Station. But why did we allow this to happen, I hear you ask? Surely we have rules. Well, actually, no. There is no binding ban against these kind of weapons tests, and nor is there any kind of global mechanism for clearing up the mess. Then there are the legal grey zones. Right now, some commercial companies are testing the boundaries, trying to write their own laws. One satellite internet provider famously declares in its user agreement that future users on Mars will recognize no authority from the Earth. Now, hopefully that was a joke, but, well, I'm not laughing, because it shows a deeper mindset that the final frontier might also be the final loophole, that the laws of Earth might stop at the edge of space. If we let that take hold, then far from the science fiction utopia that I signed up for, we risk space becoming the next Wild West, and we let the same cruel and violent plotlines of centuries past play out all over again. Now, I said earlier that we must have rules. Well, there is a rule book of sorts. It's called the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, written when two space superpowers launched one satellite a year each, and trust between them was weak. It says some beautiful things, that space is the province of all humankind, that no nation can claim a sovereignty of celestial bodies, and that space must only be used for peaceful purposes. Visionary, but times have changed. The truth is, the Outer Space Treaty is no longer fit for purpose. We're trying to govern 21st century space activity with 20th century law. It can't govern things that weren't even conceived of when it was written. It was written for the Cold War, not the Cloud War. It says nothing about resource extraction rights, environmental protections, commercial accountability. It forbids national appropriation, but doesn't even consider corporate appropriation. It's a fantastic foundation, but we desperately need to build the next stories. The Artemis Accords, signed by more than 40 nations, are a promising next step. They commit to the peaceful and cooperative exploration of the moon and beyond, and are designed to extend the principles of the old treaty to the realities of today. They introduce the idea of transparency, of sharing of scientific data, and the creation of exclusion zones around lunar activities to prevent conflict. But not everyone has agreed. China and Russia haven't signed. And anyway, they only address some of the more immediate governance gaps. So who writes the next chapters? Not the superpowers, they're too busy competing. This is where small countries can lead. Okay, I want you to go on a journey with me. I want you to imagine a country, a small country, really small. Let's say a population of about 681,000 people. Can you imagine anywhere like that? In 2017, this country, with less people than many cities, passed one of the world's first space resources laws. They didn't say they want to claim the moon, but they did say, if you operate responsibly, we'll give you legal certainty. Luxembourg didn't act alone to do this. They built bridges with other countries pioneering space law, with NASA, with ESA, with startups. They proved that you don't need rocket launches to lead in the space industry. You need rules. We in the industry see that regulation isn't a barrier, it's infrastructure. You see, chaos is bad for business. Clear, fair rules give us a level playing field and stable expectations. That stability is the foundation of investment. If we want to build permanent lunar industries, to mine water ice, to generate energy, to create oxygen, we also need to make sure we build the systems to make sure those activities are transparently reported, environmentally sound, and sustainable. The good news is we already have a precedent. 2 systems right here on Earth which prove what can be done. The United Nations Convention of the Law of the Seas, UNCLOS, lets nations use resources but keeps international waters shared. And then Antarctica, the Antarctic Treaty System, commits the whole continent for peaceful and science uses only and freezes territorial claims. Now imagine expanding that same premise beyond Earth, a new lunar law using the environmental protections of Antarctica to maintain the moon's science and cultural sites, with elements of the law of the seas to govern commercial activities. That's not new, it's proven. This is where small countries can excel. Countries like Luxembourg, nimble, technologically advanced, globally trusted, can become the architects of consensus, helping to design the frameworks that the big powers struggle to agree on. Imagine Luxembourg hosting a convention, a neutral ground where principle and pragmatism are the core values, helping to design a framework to decide how we share orbital lanes, how we protect near-Earth space. Luckily, that's not science fiction. That's good old-fashioned diplomacy. And that's an area where Luxembourg already has a proud heritage, where it's already proven that it can choose wisdom over power. When I look up at the moon today, I still see wonder. I always will. That's why I love my work. But I also see a mirror. How we treat the sky reflects who we are here on Earth. We can either export greed, carve up orbits, hoard resources, make all the same mistakes again, or we can export wisdom, share the benefits before we're left fighting over the scraps, lead with principle, not just profit. Let's make Luxembourg and other like-minded nations the convening heart of a new ethical space age. I have a small son and a daughter, and we're beginning to look up at the stars and moon together, but one day they might ask me, who decided how we share them? I want to be able to say, we did. The future of human geography is not just about where we go, it's about how we get there and who we've become by the time we arrive. Let's choose wisdom. Thank you.